Well, hey there everybody, it's Snackbox coming to you from a beautiful but overcast day here in Chicago, Illinois. Really excited to be here talking to you about all of this. This is my $200 Amazon setup. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I bought this for under $200. Everything you need to get out into the woods with the exception of clothes. And what I did is I took it down to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and took a weekend trip, did about 30 miles, 25, 30, 20, I don't know. Did a lot of miles with it and checked out all of this gear. 2 nights in the Smoky Mountains, it was rainy. And that really gave me a great opportunity to check out all of this gear. So I'm gonna go over all of the stuff that worked, all of it didn't, and all of it that worked, all of it that didn't, and Remy here is gonna help. So stick around everybody, we've got a lot to cover, not a lot of time. Let's get to it. All right, so let's get some of the basics out of the way first. The first thing that you need to know is that 100% absolutely, I feel confident that for under $200, you can set yourself up with a serviceable backpacking kit that will last you until you can upgrade to some nicer gear. With that in mind, what I wanna do first is cover some of the pieces of gear that I thought were not necessarily great. First one here, and you probably guessed it, is this sleeping pad. This is a closed cell foam sleeping pad. These are great options for people who are just starting out, but this is one of the first pieces of gear that I would replace. It's a great option because you can't make it go flat. So if you're worried about some of those higher end inflatable sleep pads, this one is great because there's nothing you can put it on. You could literally set this up on a rose bush. It's not gonna go flat. But what I will say is that if you don't have a really soft campsite to begin with, this is super uncomfortable. It's basically sleeping on the ground, and I didn't particularly love it. And I'm a side sleeper, which puts a lot of added pressure there on the hip area. So this one is one that I would replace early and quickly. Now with the backpack, spoiler alert, I actually loved it, but the place where you would have to put a closed cell foam pad on the outside means you can't use the rain cover. So this is absolutely the first piece of gear that I would upgrade. But with that in mind, I think it would work for a number of months while you were getting set up, especially if you really just wanted to make sure that you had an option to get out in the woods. And that ultimately is the name of the game here. The best piece of gear that you can use is the one that will get you into the woods. And if it takes this, this is certainly serviceable, although it's not super comfortable. This one is going to sound like blasphemy to everybody, but the Frog Togs gear. So a couple of things. I took the Frog Togs rain suit out into the woods. I will say that I still love the jacket. It works really nicely for me, and we got caught in torrential rain throughout this trip. The jacket was great, and if you followed a long time, you'll know that I used this on the Colorado Trail and it worked great for me. I did have my first hole put in it this trip, and so that's a little bit of a bummer. But what I can also tell you is that the pants here, this one is bananas, right? And so the pants, because I'm a shorter guy, pants were made for a larger person, so they basically sat too low. I went to step over a log, and next thing you know, I got Frog Togs stripper pants. Not ideal, that's not great. Now these things here only cost me about $20 to begin with, and if you know anything about my love of Frog Togs, you'll know that I feel like rain pants are already a little bit overkill and a little bit too hot for me. So this is not a deal breaker for me necessarily, but what I will say is I probably won't even carry new pants if I buy a new Frog Togs rain suit. So this is one that you kind of have to weigh your pros and cons with this. If you were absolutely set on a pair of rain pants, these would work in the short term, but you'd probably want to make sure that that's on the forefront of your mind in terms of replacing it soon, because these are not super durable. But again, that's nothing new. Anybody who's seen my review of Frog Togs know that I love them, but I love them because they're about as durable as they are expensive. And so when you do tear them, you're not going to feel it in the wallet quite the same as you would some of the higher end gear. Now the next piece of gear here, these are the Fit Life trekking poles. I bought these for about $25 or so, and I think these are serviceable. I think these will certainly work. They were plenty strong enough. And what you pay for when you buy an expensive trekking pole is a lighter piece of pole that is actually going to be just as strong as this aluminum one. Now these worked really nicely. I will say I wasn't in love with the handles, but that I knew going in. And I also didn't love the locking mechanism, specifically when it rained, because here there's not much that you can grip onto. So this one is serviceable, but it's not a great setup, especially in rainier situations. But ultimately, I think if you just need a good pair of trekking poles and you're not heading out onto a thru hike, these would certainly work for you. So I think by all means, this would be a decent one. Again, there are gonna be links for all of these down below, so feel free to check them out. You don't have to buy them from me. They do help the channel if you do, but if you do end up buying a pair of these, I don't think you'll be disappointed, but I also think in the long run, these are something that you probably want to use for maybe a year or so, because they do have this sort of plasticky feel. And then as you can see here, they came apart on me at one point. They went right back together, but I don't love that. I'd like to see them be a little bit more durable, but for $25, what are you gonna do? These work fine. I would certainly lend these to a friend heading heading off into the woods, and they're a good piece of gear because when you do upgrade, they're good for passing out to buddies, that kind of thing. They'll be fine. So I picked up a pair of these for about $12, $13. These are the Shine 1 LED hat clips. Instead of using a headlamp, you take this light, you hook it up here, and then you're good to go. And then suddenly you've got a good light. Here's what I'll say about this. I knew these were not going to be super durable. This one did hold up, and I'll still take it on my trip to the Smokies next weekend, but these are not a long-term solution. And for $6 a piece, you can actually probably buy a really serviceable headlamp, a real deal headlamp, for somewhere in the ballpark of $15 to $20. So I don't recommend picking these up because their longevity isn't good unless, and here's the one caveat, unless you're doing a lot of summer hiking and you're looking for a really ultralight option, because these are not super heavy, and if you're hiking in the summertime, you're not gonna need a headlamp unless it's an emergency anyway, because you're gonna be hiking early mornings and early evenings, and basically you're not going to need a lot of headlight work, and if you do get in a pinch, you can always use your cell phone flashlight. So this is one, I don't necessarily recommend it unless you're buying it specifically for the weight and not the durability, and if you are, then you probably, you know, you're probably an advanced enough hiker, you don't need to be watching what I've got to say anyhow. Let's talk about some of the gear that I thought was really surprisingly good. The first one here is the Gellert Hebog sleeping bag. Holy moly. This guy here, this one was $13.50. I bought two of them for $27, I believe. And holy moly, this thing was rated, says it's rated to 20 degrees, and I don't think it'll probably be that comfortable at 20 degrees. I think it'd probably be a little bit cold, but overall, this guy worked out really nicely for us. We saw temperatures in the 50s, and it was plenty warm for that. And it fit my oldest brother. He used the other one, and he is about 6'2", 6'3", so it worked fine for a taller person, particularly somebody who doesn't sleep all stretched out. He tends to sort of curl up. So let's talk about why this one is super inexpensive. One of which is that it uses a really sort of pillowy synthetic material for the filling, and what that means ultimately is that this one is not going to pack down very small, so it will work fine for insulation, but it's not going to be the kind of thing that you're going to pack into an ultralight setup. But this would certainly work, especially for the weekend warriors who are just trying to get out there and see if they like backpacking enough to throw in the money that they would need to buy a down sleeping bag. Ultimately, that's where I would go if I were trying to set up my perfect setup, but this one is certainly serviceable for those summer hikers, people who are going on a family vacation or just going for a shorter trip to see how it goes. So I was pretty okay with it. The other thing that you're gonna notice here, and I don't know if you can see it or not, maybe I'll get a photo of it. See how it's got the threads here? So one of the ways that a tent really holds in that insulation and makes sure it's consistent is they do what's called baffling. And baffling is just a fancy term for the thread sort of pattern, the way they sew the sort of pockets together to fill it with insulation. Now, with a higher end one, they're going to sew it multiple times, so you have multiple seams, but with the cheaper ones, they're just going to run one thread here. So what happened on this one is basically I turned at one point and ripped a couple of the threads out, and that's something that I would expect from a cheaper $13 bag, not something I would expect from my more expensive higher end bags. So this bag will work for the short run, but expect it to sort of have a shorter shelf life, not last quite as long. It was nice to see that Gellert puts out relatively affordable sleeping bags that you could use as a starter bag. Again, this is a starter bag. It's not one I would take on a through hike. It's not one I would take on a longer trip. But if you're planning to do a couple of weekends a year, 3-4 weekends a year, and you don't want to spend the $200-300 it would take to get into a down bag, this is a fine enough option. But keep in mind that there's certain limitations with it. I personally found it plenty comfortable, and it was fine, especially with that really uncomfortable sleeping pad. I thought this worked really nicely, and honestly, I might end up taking it on a trip, maybe to the Everglades or somewhere, because it's insulated with that synthetic filling. That's it. This one here, holy mess. This was the jam right here. This is the Stanley Adventure 24-ounce cook set, and this guy was terrific. This was about $15, and this is one I would recommend not just for starters. This one works fine. This is just a good all-around budget. It's stainless steel. It's a great cook set. It held the heat really nicely, cooked everything. It was nice and spacious. I didn't love that it was so tall, so it was one that I had to be careful about not tipping over, especially because it tapers here. But I thought this one worked out really exceptionally well. So if you're going out in the woods and gonna do mashed potatoes, ramen noodles, that sort of basic camp food, this guy was great. 24-ounce Stanley Adventure cook set. This is one that I'd absolutely buy for a teenager if I was going hiking with somebody who doesn't do as great a job taking care of stuff, because this thing is probably quite literally bulletproof. Love this one, really glad I picked it up, and I will be hanging on to this in the long run. Now, I paired that guy with this guy here, and this is the PS Kook stove with piezo starter. This one I thought worked out fine. This is one that was about $15, maybe even less than that, and it was fine. It was a little bit heavy, a little bit big, but ultimately for what I got, it did the job, and the piezo starter kept working throughout the course of the trip. I thought this was a fine deal. Not necessarily a great deal. I think for those of you who know me, I really love that BRS stove. I think for that price and that weight, you pair it with the lighter and you're in great shape. This is one that I wouldn't mind having in my sort of shareable pile for people if they ever ask me to borrow a piece of gear. This is one I'd lend out specifically because I know it would work well for them. I know it's durable, it's big enough, but I also know that if they don't ever return it, I'm not going to be sad about it like I might be if I lent them my MSR Pocket Rocket Deluxe, something like that. This is a great stove, not just a great stove for a starter stove, but this would be a good budget stove that I would certainly share with somebody and be happy taking into the woods in the long haul. Now let's talk about this guy here. This is the Underwood Aggregator. This is the tent that I use. A couple of different things. Number one is this guy was only about $50, give or take. I think the normal price on it's closer to $70. It's a solo person tent. You do need the trekking pole to set it up, but I thought this one worked fine for me. This one was a little bit short and I'm 5'8", 5'9", so this is not one for a taller person. I don't recommend it for anybody much taller than me. I found it to be pretty short, and I would say that before you take this out into the woods, you need to try setting it up 3, 4, even 5 times to make sure you get it down right, because the sort of staking pattern was a little bit tricky. And you'll see in the video here that I actually had a hard time setting it up taut the first night, but the second night I sort of figured it out, and from there I was able to use it. So this would be a tent that I would again recommend similarly to the Stanley Adventure Cook Set. This is one that I would offer to somebody who is sort of a teenager getting into backpacking, and you want to make sure that they're into it before you invest in a bigger, more expensive tent. But this one would work fine. It was only about 2 pounds, and I thought it was just fine. The condensation wasn't great on it, which I expected. The ventilation wasn't exceptional, but again, this is a good tent for somebody to start out. The material is fine, and it's pretty small. I mean, if you look at it next to this guy here, or even my soda can, it's not a huge tent, and it's certainly one that dollar for dollar would be great to give to a teenager, somebody who's getting brand new into backpacking, because it will work, will keep them dry, kept me dry through a torrential night. And so I think this is a serviceable tent, not necessarily my dream tent, but certainly one that I would use again on another hike, especially if I knew that the weather was going to be pretty decent, hopefully somewhere that's not muggy enough that's going to create a lot of that condensation. Let's talk about this guy here. This is the belle of the ball. This is the One Nice backpack, and it says it's a 45 liter plus a 5 liter, saying sort of the brain of it is 5 liters. I think this one is probably closer to a 40 liter. I don't think the measurement is exact on it, but this backpack was super comfortable, worked really nicely for me, and it was only about $40. So this one was really exceptionally good for me. A couple of things that I didn't love. One, the buckle system for the front buckles where you connect it around your stomach. They didn't have a very easy adjustment. They took a long time to kind of dial in, so if they came out of adjustment, they weren't great. So basically what you see here is you've got this setup here where you can't normally on a backpack that's really comfortable, you just tug on it and it tightens up. This one has more of an elaborate buckle system. I don't love that, but I think you could probably replace it by just taking a trip to REI and buying some new replacement buckles. So I didn't love that, but it was fine overall. Just a little more of that headache. It's part of what you pay for when you get a more expensive backpack. The other thing that I mentioned here is with this sleeping pad, it had to sit sort of right here on the backpack because there aren't buckles on the bottom here for me to tie it off. What that meant is whenever it rained, I had to put my rain cover on and then pass this over to my brother because there was nowhere really for me to connect it to the bottom of the tent. Now I will say it did have this other pouch here that I really love. This is a little bit of that waterproof zipper. That was really great. The best part of it honestly was down here. You'll notice it's got the rain cover pouch on the very bottom, and so when I click here, I'm not clicking there, had a rain cover with it and it worked great. So this one here for $40 came with a rain cover, and that's usually a $10 to $20 addition to your pack. So that one was added value. Thought that was really great. And then lastly here, it did have this second pouch here. So this pouch that sort of has a different access point, but it's sealed off from the rest of the backpack. So you could put dirty clothes or something similar here, but I ended up just not using it because it still uses the cavity here for the main backpack. So just leaving that empty gave me more workable space inside. It does look like the kind of bag that after a number of uses, you might start seeing some wear faster than you would a more expensive backpack, but I thought this one, dollar for dollar, was probably one of the best values that I took with me there into the Smokies. And I think this is the type of backpack that if I were just getting into backpacking and starting out, this is absolutely one that I would use. And honestly, if I got into an ultralight enough setup that I wasn't worried about sort of the weight pulling down on it, it might even be a backpack that I use on a longer trip or something. So I really love this one. Keep in mind that the weight on it is not exactly correct. I would probably say it's a little bit smaller than what it's advertised at, close to 50 liters. It certainly is not that big. Again, I think it's probably closer to 38 to 40 liters, but for a weekend trip, that's probably what you want to target anyway for your size. Love this guy, thought it was great. I will 100% be hanging on to this one or maybe passing it on to somebody. And did you notice there's like this orange theme kind of going on? That's kind of cool, right? I don't know. Well, that basically covers it, everybody. I hope that this has been helpful to you. I hope it also maybe changed your mind a little bit about some of the gear and what is worth it, what's not worth it. Because for me, I often think we get confused sometimes that the more expensive a piece of gear, the better it is. And that's not always the case. That a lot of times there's some really great pieces of gear out there that we don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on. Overall, I think this is a pretty decent setup. Would certainly use it in the future. I would replace that sleeping pad first, and then I would start looking for smaller items, like working on that sleeping bag to replace it, and then maybe replace little things like that headlamp and move my way up to trekking poles, then eventually the tent, kind of work my way through. But that's kind of how I think about my gear anyway, is I start out with a piece of gear or start out with a gear setup that I can use, and then I start figuring out what I want. That way I don't spend $300 on a tent that I ultimately replace with something less expensive. And I'll be honest with you, the tents that I've been using in the past have not been the most expensive in their sort of category. So using those 6 Moon tents, for example, I'm using a much less expensive tent than a lot of people, but it's because I know what I'm looking for and I know what I'm willing to do without. In that case, with the Deschutes Plus that I used in 2020 on the Colorado Trail, I knew I could do without a floor because I had hiked enough, but that comes with time and experience, and the best way to pay for that experience is to buy cheaper gear so you can ultimately upgrade it later once you're sure you know what you want, what you need, and what you're not willing to deal with. I hope that's helpful to everybody. I hope you'll click like and subscribe and stay tuned, because my next video, I'm going to be going over my new setup for the Colorado Trail. It's a lot of different gear. It's a lot of more expensive gear, surprise, surprise, but it's also gear that I've really worked hard to kind of dial in, and I'm really excited about this Colorado Trail through hike coming up in just about 4 weeks or so. So hope that's helpful. Be sure to send me a message on Instagram at Backcountry Champion. Say, hey, Snackbox, hit me up with one of those outside comfort zone stickers and I will get that bad boy in the mail to you right away. Just saying thanks for being a part of this community. Hope you're doing well wherever you are, and I'm looking forward to seeing you out there on the trail. Take care, everybody. This Snackbox out.